What's up everyone, it's superswimteam 7 here. So I recently saw H3H3 and iDubbz new videos, and I saw how popular they were getting, and I thought it'd be fun to make a little twist on it of my own. So today I'm going to be ranking all of the MCU movies from F tier to S tier. I think it's going to be easiest if I start off with my most favorite and my least favorite. So my all-time favorite one is Winter Soldier. I think Winter Soldier is just probably the best out of all the MCU movies. And the reason I say that is that Marvel movies have a tendency to try to be really good action movies, but they don't really try to be more than that. And I think Winter Soldier is the one that really breaks ground, and it acts as more than just a Marvel movie. What I mean by that is that some superhero movies are definitely more Oscar-worthy than others, and I think that the Winter Soldier falls into that category, right alongside movies like The Dark Knight and Logan. So that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and give The Winter Soldier my first S-tier ranking. So my least favorite MCU movie of all is definitely Thor: Dark World. I feel like they tried to do too much when they had too little, and Christopher Eccleston is just an amazing actor if you've ever seen his season of Doctor Who. To see him misused here and not really get many lines at all whatsoever, and just kind of be thrown into the background while Jane and Darcy do a whole bunch of call that has absolutely nothing to do with Thor is just really kind of annoying. Thor: Dark World is not my favorite movie. And honestly, I don't think the original Thor is much better, and the only thing that redeems the original Thor is probably Loki. I think that the original Thor is a little bit better than Dark World, but honestly not by much. Now, when you compare that to Ragnarok, I'm going to straight up put Ragnarok in A tier, because I feel like Ragnarok is really one of the stronger MCU movies, and like Winter Soldier, it has a lot of rewatchability to it. I don't ever find myself wanting to rewatch the first two Thor movies, but I'm totally down to rewatch Ragnarok pretty much any time. Now, if I had to pick another movie that I think is probably one of the lower rated ones, I'm going to go with Iron Man 2. I think that this movie does a good job setting up the rest of the MCU and leading the way to movies like Thor and Avengers, but I don't feel like it does the best job with the villain. I feel like Whiplash is really weak, and he never gets enough room to really shine. But on the other hand, the other villain, Justin Hammer, is really cool. And I really enjoy Sam Rockwell's performance as Justin Hammer. Actually, if you guys haven't seen All Hail the King, which is a bonus feature on Iron Man 3, you should probably check that out, because it actually features Trevor Slattery and Sam Rockwell from the Iron Man movies, reprising their roles, and it kind of tells the story of what happens to them after the Iron Man movies. And fun fact, they're actually in the same prison that Luke Cage breaks out of in the TV show. I think the first Guardians of the Galaxy is definitely an A tier as well. It's another movie that I'm down to rewatch again and again and again. I really love the character chemistry and the bonds that these characters share with one another. It's one of the few found family superhero movies where they actually feel like a found family. Now that being said, I wasn't as big of a fan of Guardians 2, but I understand what that movie was trying to do. I just don't really find myself wanting to rewatch it that often. But that being said, I still love all the special effects sequences in it. I think it's a pretty good movie, but it's not quite as good as the first one, to be honest. Now, this one might be a little bit more of a controversial opinion, but I'm a pretty big fan of Homecoming. And Homecoming is another one of those movies that I could probably just rewatch again and again and again and always find something new with it. I love all the throwbacks and callouts to the MCU history and everything that's kind of like came before it, and even some stuff in the comics, like the fact that the Stark suit is sort of based off the original Ditko designs. The Incredible Hulk is one that is really kind of iffy for me, because I personally like the movie a lot more than most people, but I don't find myself wanting to rewatch it either, so I don't know if I want to put it in C list or D list, but I'm leaning towards D list considering how often I don't want to rewatch it. I mean, it's probably been like 2-3 years since I saw it last. I think the last time I saw it was before Age of Ultron came out, actually, so probably even longer than that. I really like Ross in the movie, and I really like Leader and Abomination. All the villains are pretty good, and honestly, I think that Edward Norton does a pretty interesting job playing Hulk as well. Now, I'm a big fan of Captain America: The First Avenger, and it's a really enjoyable movie for me to watch, and I want to put it in the A ranking, but the reason I'm going to put it in the B ranking is that I have one small complaint about the movie. I don't like that a year and a half passes over like 5 seconds during a time-lapse sequence. There's nothing to really show how much time has passed and how much these characters have developed alongside each other, or how much their bonds have grown. All that development sort of happens off-screen, which I find kind of frustrating. I'm just gonna throw this out there: if they ever made a Disney Plus Invaders TV show with Captain America, Bucky, Namor, the Human Torch, and maybe even T'Chaka, I would be totally down for it, and I would probably watch every episode. And I feel like the year and a half gap time skip during this sequence might have actually set up more stories in the MCU during World War II than we're even aware of. So this is another controversial pick. I actually really like Iron Man 3, enough to the point that I'm going to put it in the A tier. I feel like a lot of people get hung up on the Mandarin twist, and honestly, it is a pretty frustrating one. But if you've ever seen the short All Hail the King, you would understand that there's actually another Mandarin in the MCU. And from the way it seems, he actually is connected to the Ten Rings, and he seems a lot more formidable than Trevor Slattery did. One of the main things I really like about Iron Man 3 is that it's not necessarily an Iron Man movie, it's more of a Tony Stark movie. I really like the sequence of Tony Stark breaking into the mansion and then fighting his way through things, and basically spending a whole lot of the movie without even using the Iron Man armor. I love the way Tony uses his brains to fight in this movie, even though he doesn't have his armor at some points. I think that's one of the most appealing parts of it, and it really helps deepen the character of Tony and who he is, as well as dealing with the ramifications of the first Avengers movie, and setting up the rest of the MCU as a whole. Everything from Age of Ultron to Endgame is set up here, honestly, and there's a whole lot of foreshadowing when you look back on it. I feel like when people rewatch this movie, they'll have a lot deeper appreciation for it. Like I said, people get too hung up on the Mandarin thing. Now, I really liked Black Panther, and I'm going to put Black Panther in S tier, because just like Winter Soldier, Dark Knight, and Logan, I feel like Black Panther is another one of those movies that has something really significant to say and has a strong message, and that's not something Marvel movies have a lot. This movie was completely different than all the MCU movies that came before it, and honestly, that's one of the things that makes it most appealing to me. The only reason I would ever place it any lower is that the CGI kind of falls apart at the end, and it doesn't look the best when they're inside of the vibranium mines fighting. But overall, I really enjoyed the movie, and I can't wait to see what they do with Wakanda next. Wow, I can't believe I haven't had any C tier movies yet. I guess that's probably the one I should pick next. I'm gonna go with Age of Ultron, and honestly, when I first saw this movie, I was just extremely disappointed. But before I watched Homecoming, I actually watched Age of Ultron and Civil War back to back, and I found that when you watch Age of Ultron directly before Civil War, it kind of leads right into it, and in that way, Civil War actually made Age of Ultron a lot stronger of a movie. And the thing about Age of Ultron is that it kind of sets up everything that came after it. I definitely have a few problems with the movie, like I'm not a big fan of Ultron, to be honest with you. I feel like James Spader was a really bad casting choice for the character. I don't think of the guy from The Office as Ultron whenever I hear him. I always think of Ultron as having a much more sinister and robotic voice. Ultron is a villain that should be really scary, and James Spader's voice just isn't scary. It's only kind of off-putting and creepy, which isn't the same thing as being scary. Civil War is another one that I kind of want to put in the S tier, but yeah, I'm just going to put it in the S tier. If I'm going to be completely honest with you guys, I think that Civil War might have been my favorite Marvel movie before I saw Avengers Endgame. I think that Civil War does a really good job setting up where the MCU is going to go, from everything from Homecoming all the way up through the end of Phase 3 with Endgame and Far From Home. I really love the airport battle, and I still don't think we've had a single fight that's near as good as the airport battle in the MCU sense. Another thing I like about Civil War is that it's kind of a culmination of every single movie that came before it. Everything from Iron Man to Winter Soldier kind of all leads you here, and this is the first place where everything really crosses over and you start to see the ramifications of everyone's actions on everyone. I'm going to put Doctor Strange in the B tier. It's a lot like the first Avenger in that it's not a perfect movie, but it's still extremely enjoyable. Calceus, or however you say his name, He's really bland and unoriginal. He doesn't really have that much depth as a character or as a villain, and I just didn't get much out of the role or the villain. I'm not a fan of him. But Dormammu was pretty cool, and I kinda hope that we get to see Dormammu again. I was a big fan of Benedict Cumberbatch in the role, and I'm actually really excited to see more Doctor Strange in the future. I'm gonna put Captain Marvel in the B tier as well. A lot of people didn't like this movie as much as I did, but I actually really enjoyed it. But even though I enjoyed it, it definitely wasn't without its flaws. I felt like the narrative structure was kind of strange, but that's only because they're really trying to avoid the whole origin story trope again, I guess. But that being said, I don't have any problems with Carol. I feel like Brie Larson did a pretty good job as her, and I really enjoyed seeing her in the role. I feel like Captain Marvel is a lot better in the Captain Marvel movie than she was in Endgame. I wasn't really a fan of her in Endgame, but I was a big fan of the Captain Marvel movie. One of the things I loved the most about the movie was that on the Kree home planet of Hala, all of the buildings and all of the people and all the spaceships and stuff kind of look like throwbacks to the classic Jack Kirby artwork. And in addition to that, they have that kind of a neon-looking Lego aesthetic to them that kind of reminds me of 90s sci-fi movies like Independence Day. I really like the aesthetic of the Kree ships, and I really hope to see more Kree stuff out of the cosmic side of the MCU in the future. I'm gonna give the original Avengers a B ranking as well. If it was still 2014 even, I'd probably give it an S or an A, but to be honest with you, this movie hasn't aged very well. Its special effects are starting to look kind of dated, if I'm gonna be honest, and it's one of those movies that every time you rewatch it, you kind of like it less and less. The first time I watched it, not knowing any of the jokes that were coming, I thought it was just hilarious, and I loved it so much, and I couldn't imagine any movie ever being better than it. But now the Marvel Universe has actually managed to make movies that are even better than Avengers. Several of them, actually. And because of that, I just don't feel like the original Avengers holds up like it used to. It was the first time we ever saw these characters on screen together, and it was really great for that, and it was really funny the first few times you watch it, but the third time you hear, I understood that reference, it's more annoying than funny. AntMan was a really good movie in my opinion, but it wasn't like a great movie. I don't think it's on par with any of the A tier movies, so I'm gonna put it in B tier. The best parts of AntMan were the heist sequences in my opinion, and all the special effects scenes. I really like the way that they use Scott's powers, and I really like the way they do that in Ant-Man and the Wasp as well. And I feel like Ant-Man and the Wasp just wasn't as strong as Ant-Man because of its villain. The original Iron Man is one that I'm always gonna love. I remember watching this when I was a kid for the first time and just falling in love with the flick. I'm gonna give it an S tier for sure. It's another one of those movies that's just infinitely rewatchable no matter how many times you've seen it. Which is something I can say for all the movies I'd put in S tier. So that leaves me with the last two, Infinity War and Endgame. And honestly, I gotta just give them both S tier as well. I kinda knew what was gonna happen in both of them just from being a fan of the comics, but I still ended up loving both of them anyway. I love that Infinity War is a culmination of all the movies that came before it, and to an extent, I guess Endgame is as well. I love the way that Infinity War basically acts as the first movie to be completely and entirely about the villain. I think Josh Brolin does an amazing job as Thanos, and I really hope that we get to see more of him again someday via like Captain Marvel movies that take place in the 90s or 2000s. My main complaint about Infinity War is that we didn't get enough of Thanos before it, but we get so much of Thanos in Infinity War that I can't really complain. And when it comes to Endgame, I love that Endgame is just a love letter to all the MCU movies that came before it. I don't want to spoil too much about Endgame, but if you've seen Endgame, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about when I say that it's just a love letter to every movie that came before it. I mean seriously, I think that Endgame actually references every single Marvel movie out of all 22 of them, which is incredibly impressive. So I guess with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the video. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, maybe leave a like and subscribe to the video if you enjoyed it, and then maybe go subscribe to my second channel, because I post some stuff there sometimes too. So thanks for watching everyone. This has been Swim Team Captain 7. I'll see you later.